have to have debate. You have to have an overall opinion sharing. And we might not always agree, but we're going to get better because of it. So I really believe that it needs to come from bringing your whole self to work and feeling like you can share ideas, and we'll get better from that.
Welcome to the Leader's Edge podcast. I'm Sandy Laycox, coming to you live from the Council's 2025 Insurance Leadership Forum. We sat down with Julie Wood, CEO of QBE North America, for a conversation on building a culture of trust and transparency. We start by discussing the speak up culture at QBE that Julie is fostering, how she developed her own leadership style, and how she learned to lead those who knew more than she did.
I do think at times we struggle with why is it so important? And to me, and really the beginning of probably even prior to my career, but I've been encouraged to share ideas and have always had the opinion that I get much more out of just the joy of working and the benefit of really soliciting other opinions. And we want to continue to foster that, just A, to make careers more rewarding, but B, the concept that we're just better together, and with the more and more innovation that we have from a variety of people voicing their opinion. I had a conversation on this last night with a leader who said she very intentionally did things that would take a group of colleagues off premise, have a lunch, have an environment where people really could be speaking at ease. And you just learn so much, particularly in leadership roles. It's really quick and easy to get in a place where people want to tell you what they think you want to hear or what might be approved. And I love that line in movies, which is like, you think we're fighting and I think we're finally talking, right? From Jerry Maguire. And I use it all the time. My team will probably roll their eyes because I really think that's right? You have to have debate. You have to have an overall opinion sharing, and we might not always agree, but we're going to get better because of it. So I really believe that it needs to come from bringing your whole self to work and feeling like you can share ideas, and we'll get better from that.
That is a great philosophy, especially as we are in a time of not listening to different perspectives. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that is something that goes really far inside your organization.
It is. I laugh because listening is part of it, right? And it's one thing to speak, but you also have to be very intentional about listening. And I know particularly there's points in your career where suddenly you're the subject matter expert and you want to share everything you know. And you have to be in a place where you're also trying to listen better. And I know from my role, like I am the chief generalist, right? I do not know what's going on with too much depth. So I have to listen because I really have a fraction of knowledge that everyone around me works for. So I make it a big point to try to find places to listen. And I think that has to cascade. And that's hard to do. Yeah. My cousin always says, he's Italian or half Italian. And he says to his mother, like, there's 5 of us at the table, Mom. That means you get 20% of the time to speak. And it always makes me laugh because it's right. Like, make sure that you speak, but you also have to listen. And it's a discipline. Because at times we have so much to say. And so that's really intentional, too.
That is great. That is so true. Tell us how this became your approach to leadership, like throughout your career. How did you develop this way of thinking?
So I look back, and my first, trial or my first forte into management, I was 27 years old.
Wow.
So I was fortunate to have a leader who put me in a position of leadership, probably well before I was ready. And when I took that role, I was in underwriting at the time. I was really trying to learn, but I certainly didn't know as much as the team around me knew. I was managing a team of about 6 people, all who were senior to me. So I was a more junior person on the team. And I was very intimidated to do that. But what I learned when I stepped into the role was, most of those people had either led at one point and didn't want to lead, and were very grateful I was taking that. And as long as I was willing to listen, there were parts around decision making they didn't want to do, but they had great input. They had better input than I had. They had better experience. They had worked longer. They were great people who counseled, but also just didn't want to necessarily be in those type of, whether it's leadership and management meetings or was just making some decisions. And so in that experience, I was forced to, because I recognized that they were much more equipped at various underwriting criteria or various technical areas. And so that, I think, really began my intentionality around listening, collaborating. I mean, I'm a team person. I probably use a lot of sports analogies when I speak, and I grew up playing sports. And so there's part of that I watch people who I think lead great teams, and there's great coaches out there. I think of, people who can really coach people that are of a variety of different backgrounds. And that to me is so inclusive, and it brings the best way of thinking forward. So it started early, I think, in life, but then really started to take hold after I took my first leadership job.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And that you could step into a situation where they all knew a lot more than you, to your own point, but there was still a role for you. There were things that they needed someone to do, and you were able to figure out what that was and lead them in a new way.
Right, and that's a skill, right? Yeah, that I had to develop, which is sit there and recognize my confidence shouldn't be on giving you an answer.
Right.
And that probably has really unlocked my abilities as a leader, is to sit there and problem solve with you, not tell you what to do, because early on I couldn't tell them what to do. They frankly knew more what to do than I did, but I needed to listen, help problem solve by asking the right questions. Probably similar to being an interviewer of people, you learn to ask the right questions to extract it. And I say this to this day, I don't necessarily know the answers, but I can tell if you do or not. And if I ask one question or two questions and then I have 20 more, like, we have a problem, right? So there's a part around, it's like, you go back, do some more work on this, and come forward. And they'll say, what's the problem? I'll say, I don't really know, but I've had enough experience that I realize that there's not enough analysis done to make a decision here. Yeah. And that's part of what I do now, is just try to extract whether or not the person making a recommendation is well-grounded.
We then talk about the challenges inherent in implementing transparency, how you decide which information to share, and the differences QBE has seen as a result of it.
It can be challenging, and you have to have the information and seek to have it. Look, information is power. The more information you have, the more powerful you are. And that's a choice. Do I share this information broadly? Am I worried about it being stolen, taken to a competitor, used against me? Are there sensitivities in the data? So, and look, there are governors, right? There's certain levels of information we're going to share at certain levels. But I think that's probably the challenge, right, to your question, is knowing what type of information to share with which group of colleagues. I find that the challenges come from other leaders debating whether or not how much information they should share. And it goes both ways, right? You have to have a little bit of an ability to navigate. Am I burdening you with too much information? Is this going to be something you have to act on? Yeah. Or is this something that just makes me feel better that, I've pushed all the information out. Everyone knows, right? And that's, you have to help prioritize. So I see a big responsibility of mine to help share. I'm very transparent on the things that particularly I've prioritized that we need to make decisions on. And so that for the culture is, okay, we have a couple priorities. At QBE, we had a couple priorities of driving profitability or of driving kind of our market brand. And so that's largely the information I'm going to share. I'm not going to share everything because I get a lot of information, right? And there's information overload, and that's partly, probably on the most fundamental level, that starts to create anxiety. So in a culture where I want you to speak up, I want this whole idea of safety, I want us to feel empowered to make decisions, but there is a level of which leadership has to feel like, I got it.
Right.
They're steering us in the right direction and they're sharing the information. So I think that's, for me at least, a big part of my job is just being thoughtful about what I share. And at times I'll think, I should share this. I'm like, let me think about that though. Is that appropriate? You want to give people information where you want their input. There's nothing worse than being given information, giving their input, and saying, well, we had already made a decision on that.
Right.
I think about really good examples of when information and transparency's worked. And there was a point when I came into at Marsh where we were really working on giving very transparently a view of workload. And this is still a debate to this day, any time you talk to different leaders. And it's like, well, there's a lot to measure in there. It's not just number of accounts or number of revenue. There's complexity. And said, okay, well, add a complexity score or something. So there was always been a big debate on how much of that do we share.
Yeah.
And I think your ability to measure workload and people's stress gets better by sharing it. Because someone will say, wait, there's a reason why I look like I have fewer accounts than you do. It's because of, and so, okay, let's think about that. So it fosters good dialogue, I think better decision making. That whole effort, there was a point then that happened, which is a true story, where we had someone resign. We reassigned the accounts, and I was just in the meeting. The leader was doing it. They put up who got what accounts, and meeting's over. Next thing I know, these people are on my calendar to speak to me, like 2 people in the department. I'm like, And so they come in and they said, I just want to know why I didn't get any of the accounts that were put out there. I didn't get anything new. I said, well, there was a decision that you were fully loaded and someone else. And so, well, is my career stalled? Am I not going forward? And I remember sitting back and I'm like, we have arrived. We're at a point where everyone's saying, I want more work. Or if I don't get more work, is there a reason? Because I want to advance. And that, to me, is the power of transparency, right? So it was just a decision making. It's, well, we can go back and address maybe there were other aspects around, your workload at peak times and so the client. And so it just creates and fosters understanding at the colleague level and a whole different environment around how people aspire to get ahead, and you get better input.
As you have sort of implemented these philosophies within the QBE workforce, do you see changes happening among employees?
Oh, yes. We are changing. And look, anytime a new leader comes in, we're changing, right? I always say new leaders are exhausting, and I'm very aware of that. And there's a certain level of trepidation. Everyone looks at you when you come in. The first town hall you do, everyone's just watching like every move you make. It's very uncomfortable for me, at least as a leader. And now I'm much more trusted, right? So there is this part around establishing trust that starts to, I think, just really help scale and accelerate progress. And for us, it's trying to make our brand well known, trying to achieve profitability, being a place that attracts new talent. And so all of these things are things that are starting to develop, right, as we've shifted. And we had to make some challenging decisions. We had an exit of business. We have some new leaders that have come in, so that signals we had some turnover at different levels, and all these things can be viewed as a very negative issue. But we talked about them. We talked about what we were doing. Even our decision around the exit middle market, our engagement score was very high, and I didn't expect it to be. But that was the power of being very transparent and a bit around honesty on mistakes we've made. And I'm a big proponent of, I will share decisions we've been up against. And I recently put a new leader into our crop business. We have a big crop. And I said, just remember, there is this philosophy around 2-door decisions and 1-door decisions. And 2-door decisions mean like the door can open and it can close, but it can swing both ways. Most decisions can swing both ways. And so at some point you reserve the right to say, I have more information. I might need to make a different decision and take it back or just adjust it. We can't, some decisions we can't undo, but a lot of them we can readjust. And I'm a big believer in make the decision, adjust as needed. That means don't make erratic decisions, but we'll make them and we'll be transparent. And so I've admitted mistakes. We're going through AI work that is hard, right? It's hard. It's innovative. It seems like it's easy. Everything you read is like, it's going to be great. And it's not that easy. And so being honest about where we thought that was going to do a lot more than it did. So we're going to have to, add some cost here or do some things differently. So to me, that's all these things in the culture of QB. We're trying to establish honesty, a culture of trust, an area in which you could make mistakes, and really believing that will bring out the best in each person, and ultimately together we'll perform better as a team.
I think that ability to admit mistakes openly is probably huge, I would imagine, because it just probably allows people to just relax a little bit and do their jobs and not worry that one mistake is going to be the end of it for them.
It's really interesting because it is a big one. It comes up in employee voice, we call them voice pulse surveys that we do. And it comes up, my ability to admit mistakes, and do I see other leaders admitting mistakes? I maybe that's just how I am. I'm very quick to admit when I've made a mistake. I mean, you don't like to admit you've made a mistake. Like,
Sure.
wouldn't it be great if, and I probably index a little bit to perfectionism, but when you do that, you just make mistakes all the time. And it's not about the mistake, it's about how you own it, right? So this work that we've done recently with AI was, how did we set it up and where were there mistakes made? If we didn't have a culture where people felt comfortable to start talking about the mistakes, I believe they would have started blaming each other, right? And it was such a innovative experiment that we needed tech and business leaders and operation leaders working together. And it's hard. And there's parts around they didn't like what was happening, or that's a lot of change. And we were in a place where I said, okay, well, maybe I would have done some things differently. And as I say it, others start saying it, versus it's their fault, it's his fault. Right? And I'm like, who wants to work like that? Like I love working with the team as long as we're very clear on at points we're going to fail together or we're going to win together, right? It's no fun to win alone and or fail alone.
Finally, I asked Julie to share some advice for other leaders across industries working to build a culture that allows people to feel safe and be productive.
I think in reflection of things, to me, it's a little less conscious. It's probably just a bit of my makeup. I talk about being, some things that happened to me earlier in my career. I think the big unlocks for me in this, and it's really fostered an environment where people feel safe, is when I've been very vulnerable. And it's not how I wanted to lead at all, right? Who wants to be really vulnerable to the point where actually when I first had children, I didn't put their pictures on my desk. I was very conscious that I didn't want to be perceived as this mother of two young children because I was afraid it'd hold me back. And also I knew if people asked me a lot of questions at that point, I would get emotional because I was I'm traveling and running around and I wasn't home. So I have found the more I have shared around these things, and there were times where something might happen with the child and I had to leave, right? Or I had to do something. And I being very honest about that versus being a little I just need to leave, right? Don't ask me any questions about my personal life. And so then I started sharing more and more because I recognized just the way I was supported changed, right? Other leaders said, oh my gosh, I went through the same thing. My kid broke their arm and I know what you're going through. And it just starts to create this empathy and relatable culture. During COVID, I did a town hall where I asked everyone to send in something around their family or what they were faced with in COVID. And the stories that came in were just heart-wrenching. A lot of people were working in hospitals, their spouse couldn't come home. And I started reading them. We were all at home. And I just broke down. I mean, they were so emotional. And the amount of responses I got around that, which again, it was less intentional, but looking at it now, it's fostering an environment that isn't just talking about productivity, right? Let's move it forward, better earnings, better growth, right? This is also about aspects of who you are as a person. And I have found that if I share that and create environments where sometimes we have, even the news does this, a nice feel-good story piece at the end, it creates a different dialogue of people being interested in who one another are.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great point.
That was Julie Wood, CEO of QBE North America, talking to us live at the Insurance Leadership Forum. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Keep tuning in for more from ILF.